And I'm using a borrowed laptop and a funky mouse. And so if this thing takes off on me, just kind of bear with me. But this is one of my favorite topics. And I've given this several times, but I have to tell you the last time I gave this, I got a complaint. One of the ladies in the audience made it very clear she was pretty much offended by what I was presenting, because she doesn't like it when animals are tortured, or she doesn't like killing. Well, you came to the wrong place, because we're going to talk about killing and we're going to talk about torturing animals. So, I didn't change a thing. We're not rewriting history. This is how it happened, according to me. So, and it's also one of my favorite topics. I mean, just the whole Roman Empire is just unbelievable. The engineering and the military and just how they were able to create such an incredible culture. And a lot of it has to do with the Colosseum. So, who's been to the Colosseum? Okay, all right. Who's been to the lower level of the Colosseum? Ah, okay, gotcha. It's very important that I win. Okay. So we're going to talk about the Colosseum, obviously, and the Colosseum. Before we get into that, the Colosseum has an incredible history. It was used for about 400 years, okay? And it is estimated that about 400,000 people died in the Colosseum, okay? This is not a happy story, all right? And so if you do some simple math, that's about 3 people a day, including Sundays and holidays, for 400 years. That's a lot. And it really speaks to the brutality of the Roman culture. The Roman culture was great at many things, but by our standards, it was incredibly brutal. So let's start out from before the Colosseum. And originally, I can't remember the name. This is where they had the fights, gladiatorial fights, and events. This was built 600 years before the Colosseum. And so it gives you a sense of, it's a sense of time that we have trouble wrapping our heads around. We build a sports stadium now, and after 40 years, it's, we gotta tear this baby down. This was used for 1,000 years. Just things were much different then. And so they were having the gladiatorial fights, and that had been going on for some time. But it wasn't the best. And other cities were starting to build arenas. And I mean, Rome was the leader, and they were getting left behind. And so it was very clear that they needed an arena as well. So I'll get into the detail, but this is what it looked like. And not a lot, it's a lot different than what it looks like now. The outside was, first of all, this level went all the way around. Parts of it, it's just the outer shell, much of it was destroyed in earthquakes. So, but it also had a limestone cover on it. So it's brilliant white. And you don't see that now. It looked much different. And with all these arches, there was statues in each one. I mean, it had to be absolutely spectacular to see this. And it also had a retractable cover, a retractable roof. You know, we thought we invented that. No, 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 no. Romans had that. And it was like a canvas sail. I mean, it gets hot in Rome. And you're going to sit on those stone bleachers all day. That would be pretty nasty. So they had a retractable sail that they would put on. Engineering was unbelievable. And this is just another example. And the other thing about the Colosseum, and this is something that people don't think a lot about, is that it was one of the greatest political tools ever built. And I'll get into that as well. So, as far as the construction of the Colosseum, okay, so you have your basic foundation, and then you see there are multiple layers or decks. And then inside, there's the lower level, which is the hypogeum. I'm sorry, I don't have a pointer, so I have to use this pointer, right? You have the hypogeum, which we're going to talk about extensively. And then on top of that was a floor with sand covering. Now, do you know why they put sand on there?
Animals?
No, it's not like kitty litter.
Oh, okay.
Well, maybe. Yeah, that's the blood. You just scoop up the sand and blood and move on to the next event. So, okay, so here's a schematic. Now, this is where you get into the real culture of Rome. So it was very structured. So in the ringside seats, the best seats in the house, you had the senators, the high priest, the Vestal virgins got to sit in these really nice seats, and it's called the podium. By the way, anybody know Latin? That's really important because there'll be a lot of Latin, and I'll be myrtleizing it. So I gave this to another group, and there was a gentleman in the crowd who was a retired priest. Oh no! So I said, hey, I'm sorry, but you know, Latin isn't my first or second or third language. And he goes, I hate Latin. Okay, I can go with that. So then the next level up was, and these are premium seats, all right? So a lot of the Latin words, English comes from Latin. So the next level are the premium seats, and this is the equestrians or the knights. So there was a class of men, okay, who were knights, and so they got the next level seats. And then the next level, secundum, secondary seats, and these were general citizens. Now, citizenship in Rome was very important, and not everybody was a citizen. So, yes, natives to Rome were citizens, and when they conquered areas, there were ways that they could become citizens, but it was a very special thing to be a citizen of Rome. So they got these secondary seats. Now you're jumping up, okay? Now you're getting into the nosebleeds. So here's the secondary summit, or summum, non-citizens, foreigners, poor, and slaves. Okay, so that is the wretched refuse from teeming shores who are sitting in the really high seats. And then there's one more level. So, guess who sits up there? Hey, nothing's changed. But there's a reason. I mean, besides the obvious, there's another reason why you had to put women way up here. Anybody know what that reason is?
Blood and gore.
Oh, no, they loved it. Well, that was part of the problem. They loved it. Because when you've got women, and there are a few here, and when you see these muscular, hot, sweaty bodies, you know they can't control themselves. So you have to separate them as much as possible, okay? So, they sit up on the top. Okay, so that is the pecking order for sitting at the Colosseum. Now, there'll be a lot of questions here. So, who built the Colosseum? That's a kind of a big question. And anybody see this movie? Huh? No? No? From the 50s?
Is that Spartacus?
No, it has a Latin name. I can't even remember the name of it. I think it was lost to cinema history for whatever
Quo Vadis.
reason. Might be.
Quo Vadis, yeah, maybe.
Might be. Okay, since you're so smart, who's this guy?
Caesar? No, he's,
No, the actor.
oh, gosh, I have no idea.
No, that's wrong. Peter Ustinov.
Oh,
Okay, all right, now we're getting somewhere. So, in this movie, Peter Ustinov is playing the crazed Nero. And so, a lot of people think, well, Nero built the Colosseum. Well, that's not true. But the Colosseum was built because of Nero. And there's a distinction. So, Nero was the emperor during the Great Fire. Great Fire was in 64 AD. And 2/3 of Rome burned. And so, being the great leader that Nero was, there's all this suffering and death and destruction. And so, what does a good emperor do? He built a giant palace right on top of the land where everybody lost their homes. So he built the Domus Aurea, which is his golden palace, and it covered 200 acres. And then he also had the Colossus of Nero, which we'll come back to. And so that kind of irked people off. You know, we just went through all this, and you used all the money to build a giant palace. So the fire was in 64. They built the palace, and he wasn't murdered. They allowed him to kill himself in 68. All right? So this happened fast. And so when the next emperor came in, they said, we got to get rid of anything that has to do with Nero. So they destroyed the Domus Aurea, which they had just built. And inside, this is a lake that he had built. They built the Colosseum inside the area that was the Domus Aurea. That's how big that palace was. So it was a project to help distract people, and the Colosseum was a huge distraction, and that was its main purpose. All right, so who had it built were the Flavians, and so the Flavian dynasty was Vespasian and his sons Titus and Domitian. So Vespasian said, okay, we gotta do something here. So in 71, or 72 actually, he said, okay, we're gonna build this Colosseum. And his son Titus was in the Middle East fighting the Jewish-Roman War. It was just wrapping up. And then his son Domitian was his ne'er-do-well son hanging around. So Vespasian died before the project was finished. It only took 8 years. So it was finished in 80 AD. And so Titus was emperor when it opened. So this is the Flavian dynasty. So it was known as the Flavian Amphitheater. That was the original name. So the Flavian Amphitheater. Now, who actually built it? It was the Jews. Because they had just finished the Jewish-Roman War, and the Jews were soundly thrashed, and many of them were taken as slaves, as in like 70,000 were taken to Rome. of which 20,000 were used on the construction site. 50,000 were sent to the mines to mine the stone for the Colosseum. So the real answer to who built the Colosseum was the Jews. Next, who paid for the Colosseum? Now, Nero just spent all the money on his palace, which they just tore down. There was no money left. So, who paid for the Colosseum? It was those same fine folks who had to build it. So, this is kind of like, we're going to have Mexico build a wall and they'll pay for it. Okay, but we're not getting political here. So, yeah, they had to build it and they had to pay for it. And during the war, there was looting and pillaging. They destroyed the second temple and took all the gold. I mean, it was just so devastating for the Jews. And so they stole the gold, but a Colosseum was really expensive. And that wasn't enough. They had to have more revenue. So, anybody know what this is?
Taxation.
Pardon me?
Taxation.
Sort of. That's a bath. That's a public restroom. Okay. Oh, it gets worse. Don't start frowning yet. I told you, this is not a happy story. I know it's Christmas season and the whole bit, but
Hey, at least they were taking care of their sewage.
right.
How much is in
Well,
there?
so there was a tax on the urine collectors. So there's a urine tax. And so what was urine used for?
Fertilizer.
That's one.
Whoa.
Well, they washed their clothes.
Oh,
The ammonia. Where do you think whiter whites and brighter brights come from? You think that's Tide? No, it's urine. So you know, they always had the white tunics. Hey, you need urine to get them nice and white. But there was an even better application. Okay, you sitting down? I warned you people. I didn't see anybody leave. I will, but you're gonna leave this? So, yeah, okay. So you notice they all had bright white teeth in the movies. So they would make toothpaste out of granulated charcoal and urine and mouse brains. I can't make that up. And a dash of honey. Okay, so it was the Jews and urine tax that paid for the Colosseum. Now, how was it built? You know, it was the who, what, when, where, and why. How was it built? And by this point, they had invented the winch. Okay. Now, before I talked about the pyramids, and they had used sand ramps, and it was a lot harder. But they had winches then, but they were different. Now, this is from the museum at the lower level of the Colosseum, so they had examples. But basically, it's like a hamster wheel, and you put a guy inside, and he starts climbing, and he's just going in circles. But that's what's powering the wheel. And this is a double hamster wheel, so that was for the larger stones. So anyway, that's what they used for on the construction site. Now, excuse me. I mentioned earlier that the name was the Flavian Amphitheater. So how did it become the Colosseum? Okay. I'm so glad you asked. Remember the Colossus of Nero that was in his fabulous palace? Well, so they tore everything down and they've got this 100-foot statue. And what are you going to do with that? So they took Nero's head off and they put on the Sol, the sun god. So now instead of Nero, this is the sun god. And they, remember this was built right in his palace? So it's already there. This base is still there. So you can see where the base of the Colossus was. So now, so they've got the sun god Colossus. And so now, when they'd say, well, we're going to the games at the Flavian Amphitheater next to the Colossus, which was just too much. So they, it's a Colosseum. Okay, so that's where the name came from. Ships Ahoy. Okay, so who has seen the Gladiator movies? Okay, all right. 1, 2. Okay. You know how Hollywood movies, you have to kind of turn your brain off and say, all right. They were amazingly accurate. Okay? Not completely, because you have to have some Hollywood puffery, but they were pretty accurate. And I'm gonna make references to the Gladiator movies. Now, this is from Gladiator 2. And for those of you who saw it, you know, they pan down and there's water filled in the Colosseum. And okay, it's true. They used to flood the Colosseum, 5 feet of water, and they would create these naval ships that were flat bottomed, so they wouldn't draft very deep, and they recreate famous naval battles, and so they would have prisoners and prisoners of war, slaves. They arm them and they say, okay guys, battle of the death, have at it. And so they would have these real naval battles. Now, they showed this in the movie. Very exciting. Now, this is where the Hollywood part kind of sticks its head up. There were no sharks. And I made the mistake, once of saying, oh, there are no freshwater sharks. And the retired priest came up afterwards and said, well, there really is a species of freshwater. No, okay, thank you, but okay, you get the point. And in the movie, guys fall in and the sharks eat them. You know, no, that didn't happen. But they did have these battles to the death in the Colosseum. Now, so how did that work? Okay, well, the water in Rome, now the population was over 1 million. And so water came from aqueducts. Okay? So this is the Aqua Julia. And it ran pretty close to the Colosseum. So they just ran a spur off of the aqueduct to the Colosseum. And it would take about 2 days to fill it. And after a while, people were complaining because their water got shut off for 2 days. You know, what do you want? Do you want a naval battle or do you want water? I mean, so that's where it came from. Now in the movie, I'm going to make a lot of references to the movies. It was pretty accurate. They showed how water was flowing out of this statue. Yeah, that's how it worked. So to bring the water in, they would bring water from the aqueduct, and there were 40 inlets. Like what I just showed you, there were 40 of them, just to get the volume of water. But there were only 4 to get it out. And they could drain it in 1 hour. To the point where they would have a naval battle in the morning, and they would have gladiator fights in the afternoon. The engineering is unbelievable. These,
Back to the aqueducts.
pardon me?
Did the water go back to the aqueducts?
It drained into the Tiber. So they could do incredible things that it's just mind-numbing today. So when I was there, now I'm going to talk about the lower level, the hypogea, and that just opened a couple years ago. And anybody wear Todd's shoes? They're very expensive. Todd's Shoes, an Italian shoe brand. The owner of Todd's Shoes paid for the restoration of the Colosseum, $30 million. And part of that was cleaning out and opening up the lower level so people could see what it was like down there. So when I'm down there, I'm walking across the grate and there's water running underneath. I thought, what is that? I took a picture because I couldn't wrap my head around what am I looking at. And then I saw this. I said, I don't get that either. This is one of the 4 exits to drain the Colosseum. I didn't know what I was looking at until I came back and did some research. So pretty impressive that you could drain that thing in an hour. And then there's still some of the Aqua Giulia left. This is just not, it's very close to the Colosseum. So you can see tangible evidence of how that worked. Now, okay, ladies, this comes with a warning. Okay, so we're going to do the hot, sweaty body thing now. Not to mention the killing and the maiming. But this is what you came for, I know, to talk about gladiators. So, when we watch gladiator movies, they always have different kind of swords and shields, and you think it's random, but it's not. It is not random at all. There are different types of gladiators, and you are trained in that type, being that type of gladiator. Hoplomachus is the guy with a small shield, and he has a spear, and he has the shin guards. Retiarius is the guy with the net and the pitchfork. Scissor scares me. And Murmillo is one which you see a lot because he's got the big shield and the sword, and the helmet is traditional. So they don't just say, oh, here's a shield and here's a sword. No, they are very specific. What kind of gladiator are you? And they are trained in that art. So here's a case where Retiarius is fighting Murmillo. Okay, so that's typically what you see, and there are different types fighting each other. Excuse me. We went to a museum in Naples. Okay, we're outside of Rome, we're in Naples, and they had an incredible collection of gladiator weaponry and helmet. And here's that helmet display, and you look at these helmets and you go, wow, that's pretty ornate. These helmets are the parade helmets. They're not used in the Colosseum. And I'll get into that in a bit. So they're very decorative, very ornate. But when I looked at this, I thought, something doesn't feel right about this display. What the hell is that? So the gladiator, I mean, it looks like it's just to make a fashion statement. So can you imagine these guys fighting? And he's wearing this hat. What? I mean, okay, it's metal. It's got to be hot during the summer. I just don't get that one. I get all the others, but that one is just kind of beyond me. So, sorry, I quit doing that. You know, I took this picture because there I am. Sorry. So here are shin guards, and that's a hoplomachus shield. Remember, it was small. And these are very ornate. So again, these are not used in the Colosseum. They were for the parade. And down part of the refurbing of the lower level, they have museum pieces, and it's incredible. And so this was a gladiator's helmet. This is more likely from battle because it doesn't have all the ornate decorations on it. Now, okay, we got to talk about gladiators. This wasn't a happenstance process. First of all, in the gladiator movies, they talked about a guy who owned gladiators. That's true. This is a business. And so they owned these guys, and they had gladiator schools. And around the Colosseum, there were several gladiator schools, the largest of which is Ludus Magnus. And in gladiator school, they learned how to fight by a certain, whatever style that was chosen. But they also learned how to die, because you had to die with dignity and honor. Okay, there was no begging for mercy, or you got to take it like a man. And so they learned that. So they had these schools near the Colosseum. Now, one thing that's kind of hard to tell, but they gave them wooden weapons. They weren't stupid. You don't give these guys, because these guys they're prisoners. They're prisoners of war. So there's foreigners, slaves, but there are also people who volunteered to be gladiators, because there is a certain amount of status, especially with the ladies, with being a gladiator. So this is Colosseum. This is Ludus Magnus. So current Rome is built on top of the remains of the old building. So this is dug out. And so here's the curved wall for the arena. And then here are the rooms that the gladiators stayed in. So you can just, when you go to Rome, you have to kind of squint and use your imagination, because there's not a lot there. But you can just envision what this gladiator school was like. Now, this was also in the movie. You know what this is? This is the wooden sword. And gladiators, if they won, they won money. They won money, they get a laurel wreath, and if they won enough, they could buy their freedom. And their freedom was represented by a wooden sword. So you could show that to anybody and say, I'm a free man. And sometimes they go back and like train gladiators, or even stay being a gladiator. It's a lot of, if you're good, make some pretty good money. A lot of fame with it. So the wooden sword was what they were fighting for. And in the movie, one guy was given a wooden sword. Now, a day at the games. What was it like to attend games at the Colosseum. You start out with the parade, all right? And so they're on display. This is the pompa, as in pomp and circumstance. This is the parade before the games. Yeah, you know, and you have a few Vestal virgins dancing in the background, and there's a lot going on there. You had to have a ticket to get in. And they had these round clay coins. And for those of you who have been to the Colosseum, you notice that there were Roman numerals above every arched entrance. This had the gate, the row, and the seat number. And this was before Ticketron. And tickets were free. I mentioned earlier about the fact that the Colosseum was a political machine. And one of the reasons for building the Colosseum was to help the emperor stay in power. And, you know, the economy wasn't all that great. There were a lot of poor and destitute. And those conditions breeds revolt. So you had to keep them distracted. You had to keep them entertained. And that's why the emperors funded this, because they had to keep the masses, you know, don't look over here, look over here. So what they would do is the politicians would hand out tickets to people to attend the games. And so you didn't have to pay, but politicians got the visibility. Some things never change. So that was the tickets. Now, the first event, this is an all-day affair, okay? So this is like the warm-up band, okay? And the warm-up band here is the venatio, or the hunt. And so what they would do is bring animals, wild animals in, and have guys hunt them, right? Now, in the movie, it's Gladiator 2, it started out in Africa, where Africans were hunting lions, and then they would sell them to traders who would take them to. That is absolutely correct, because in the Colosseum, they had lions, zebras, hippos, rhinos, elephants, giraffes. It was all these exotic animals that people couldn't imagine. You know, imagine the wonder of seeing a giraffe walk out into the middle of it. You know, it seems very surreal. So a lot of money was spent capturing wild animals. They even had tigers from Asia. And so the hunt, or the warm-up event, they would hunt animals. Now, when the Colosseum first opened, the emperor declared 100 days of games, 100 consecutive days. And it's estimated, I mean, who knows for sure, but it's estimated 9,000 animals were killed during the opening 100 days. Now, if my math is correct, that would be 90 a day. 90 a day. Okay, so that helps you put the scope of this thing. And so they'd have these hunters and give them spears and swords and these animals. Yeah, sometimes the animal won, but usually not. And so that was literally, that was to get the blood flowing. Literally. And not yours, somebody else's. The bloodlust is unbelievable in this culture. So, in the movie, there's a really classic scene where a guy rides into the middle of the Colosseum riding a rhino. And that's a little over the top. I don't think that really happened. But they did kill rhinos in the Colosseum. This was great theater, watching that guy ride the rhino in the movie. But really gets your attention. Not particularly true, but yeah, not bad. All right, so that was the first warm-up act. The second warm-up band is the Damnatio et Bestias, which is execution by beast. Yeah, okay. Now we're starting to get in some real killing, okay? Now we're going to start killing people. And they would have prisoners, whoever was sentenced to death, they would have them be killed by animals or typically by animals, sometimes crucifixion. And so now this, I looked at this picture. It has not been definitively agreed upon that Christians were killed in the Colosseum. That's not clear. But a lot of people died. You know, this has got the crucifixions and the whole bit. The other thing that was important about this picture is you see this lion coming out from the floor. And in the gladiator movies, they just like pop up out of nowhere. And you go, oh, right. That is how it worked. And I'll explain that one to you. So this is realistic. Okay, after all that killing, it's time for lunch. So you have to have the intermissio, and very important, and you have to keep the people there. You don't want them to get away because you're too busy entertaining them. So what they would do is they would drop food and gifts to people in the audience. Kind of like the t-shirt cannon at the football game, you know? Some things never change. But there would be figs and sweets, and they would pass out wine or water. And so they wanted the people to stay there, so they kept them fed. And most important, your kid could buy an action figure. Did I mention things never change? We thought we invented the action figure? Oh, hell no. Get a figurine of your favorite gladiator. Dad, I want a Vermillo. So that was also part of the halftime bit, or the intermission. Now, the main event, the gladiators. Okay. Now there is a very common misconception that gladiators always fought to the death. All right, think about that. If you killed all the gladiators every day, where would you get more gladiators? That's not how it works. Sometimes you got to kill a few, but you know, these guys have to live to fight another day. So, anyway, this is a stone taken from a famous gladiator's crypt. All right. So here are two gladiators. I assume one of them is him, going at each other. And then you've got this guy scratching his head. Who is that guy?
Decision making?
Referee?
Yes. Is the referee. These things were controlled. Because again, these are property. These guys are owned by somebody. You gotta have some civility, because they need to fight again tomorrow. So they had referees. Now you don't see that in the gladiator movies. Now, here's a mosaic, which when you look at it, you go, okay, glad. There's a lot going on in this mosaic, if you really take the time to look at it. Okay, so this guy's a Hoplomachus. He's got the small shield and the spear. This guy is a Murmillo. You got the referee, but his shield is on the ground. So what's going on here? I surrender. One finger, left hand, throw your shield down. I surrender. Now, also notice a couple things about the referee. First of all, he's got a stick. Okay, do you know why he has a stick? Would you like to stand close to two guys swinging swords? Not me. I'd rather go, that's a foul. So he's telling this guy to back off because he's surrendering. So that's the story in this mosaic. All right? Now, notice one other thing. Notice the tunic of the referee. Anything odd about that? Sure. Let me give you a hint. It's striped. So, is this where striped referee shirts come from? I don't know. Seems like a coincidence to me. So now we know where the source of zebras comes from. So here's a piece of pottery. And notice, shield is on the ground, and one finger up on the left hand. He's surrendering. Now, I'm kind of surprised that they would dedicate a guy surrendering on a piece of pottery. That doesn't seem particularly glorious to me, but anyway, it's just another example of how that worked. Okay, for those of you who saw Gladiator 1, this is Commodus, the emperor. And Commodus stood up there and he passed judgment, life or death. All right, close, not exactly. This is death, and this is life. Now, do you know why that is? I'm building here. It's a little unusual, a little much. This for this. This is sword out. This is sword in the sheath. So this is what our culture does. This is what their culture did. So Hollywood, okay. Now, there was another thing in the Gladiator movie. One of the key characters was the doctor, and they needed a doctor because they had to get patched up so they could get back out there again. Again, these guys are property. They make money. So you can't have them on the disabled list. So they have a hospital for gladiators to get these guys patched up and back out on the job again. Okay, the hypogeum. That's the lower level. And I mentioned that they just spent $30 million on this. It opened 22, maybe? So, relatively new. And, for before I ever went to Rome, I would see pictures of the Colosseum. I could not understand what I was looking at. And now I do, and it's incredible. So, first, okay, I have another quiz for you. All right, so how does this work? How do they flood it? They've got this underneath the floor. How does that work? By the way, this is a trick question, so. All right.
They flooded the lower level too?
Nope. went for 2. This was not originally there. Originally, it was just the floor, and you know, there were some complaints. I mentioned, hey, you shut off my water for 2 days, and you know, this is a political thing. You can't get people too upset. You gotta. So finally, son number 2. By the way, he killed his brother, but son number 2 became emperor, and he's the one who created the hypogeum. It was like 10 years after it first opened. So no more naval battles. But this is like, the hypogeum is like the backstage. Okay, you know, that's where everything happens, and then all you see is what's on the stage. That's exactly what's going on here. And I'll show you some of the elements. Now, it's on the outer edge of the hypogeum, and it's a room. And those rooms are all the way around. And they were either like a holding area for gladiators waiting for their turn, or for the animals. Now, a well-fed lion isn't all that aggressive. And a lion with a happy attitude just doesn't feel like killing. So it was really important to not feed them and to make them as miserable as possible. All right? So when you get down into the bowels of the hypogeum, look at how narrow these hallways are. And you know, there's rooms and along the way, and also passages. Just imagine you've got screaming animals. It's hot, blistering hot in the summer. It's cold in the winter. You're carrying injured bodies in and out, and then you put a roof on this. The noise and the smell, and it was just unbelievably awful. So this is part of the floor that they put on in the restoration. So you can see now, all of a sudden, it's very enclosed, and it had to be miserable beyond comprehension. So here's a different one, but notice how high the ceilings are. It's got this huge arch. Okay, so what's this for? How do you think a giraffe gets out there? Think an elephant can squeeze through that other hallway? They had to have these for the larger animals. And I just took a picture of this because I thought it was interesting. The Romans were really big on the arch. That was a very big basis of their construction style. And this is the double arch, because they are underneath. They've got to hold up the Colosseum, so it had to withstand a lot of weight. So they used a double arch in this particular location. Anyway, so I like this picture because you've got, okay, all the action here, but you've got the senators, you know, the front row seats, and then you've got the emperor with his private box. Here's where the senators sat. And there's something it's so tangible to stand out there and say, that's where the Roman senators sat. It was, really was, I wouldn't say touching, there's nothing touching here, but surreal maybe is the term to use. So just to the left of the senators, and this is really hard to see, this is the emperor's box. And oddly enough, there's a cross there now. That's a little oxymoronic, but I'll get into that too. So this is the gate of life. So if you won, you got your pouch of money and your laurel wreath, and you got to stroll out the gate of life. If you lost, up here, this is the gate of death. So it leads to the mortuary and the hospital. So, hey, it's functional, it works. So they have the gate of life and the gate of death. So this is part of the effort that they put in. So it gives you an idea of what the floor might have been like. And okay, so we talked about the animals just appearing, right, out of nowhere. There were over 80 elevators in the Colosseum. And now some of the elevators were used remember, this is the backstage. So props were taken up, but animals were also taken up. And so they put them in a cage, and so they rebuilt, or they built one, to show what an elevator would look like. And then you'd have 4 guys. Now this is a big elevator, so 4 guys on 2 levels pushing a winch to get the cage up. And so there's a pulley, and they're pulling the cage up, and it gets to a ramp, and the ramp leads up to a trap door. And so they open the trap door whenever they want the lion to appear. So this is highly choreographed. You know, this isn't all accidental. It doesn't just happen on its own. And they also had counterweights to help offset the weight of the elevator. That's what I didn't want to happen. So. Okay, so this is what the trap door would look like. And it did such a great job because, you know, I mentioned when you're in Rome, you have to kind of imagine. You don't have to imagine much. You can see how it worked. So, there's a sample trap door, and they have, these are actual counterweights from the elevators. That I mentioned there's a museum down there. So these are museum pieces from the elevators. Now, okay, so they use the Colosseum for games for 400 years, right? And, you know, the games were really expensive, and the empire was kind of falling apart. They had barbarians at the gate. You know, things just kind of fell apart. So Colosseum is still there. So what happened to it? Well, I mentioned the upper level that went all the way around. There were 3 major earthquakes, which took a toll on that. And this is from the 13th and 14th century. They had warlords take over the Colosseum and make it like a fortress. At its height, Rome's population was 1.2 million. By this point, the population was 30,000. They all left. And I mean, again, barbarians, I mean, it just, everyone took vengeance out on Rome, let's put it that way, and it was well-deserved. But also, the aqueducts weren't maintained and were destroyed, so they didn't have water. I mean, there are a lot of reasons why, but Rome was down to 30,000, and there really wasn't much there. So, I assume some of you have been to the Vatican, right? And the Vatican is, the stonework is incredible. The granite. Where do you think a lot of that came from?
Colosseum.
Yes. And that's why there's that granite cover or limestone, I should say, it's gone. It's completely gone. And a lot of it went to St. Peter's Basilica. Now, in the museum, there was a plan in the 1700s to build a cathedral inside the Colosseum. Now, notice, by this point, this was all filled in. You know, over the centuries of neglect and abuse, I mean, it just gets filled in, and so the Colosseum was pretty much a disaster. So they thought, well, we'll put a church in it. Well, that didn't happen. However, 1750, Benedict XIV declared the Colosseum to be a holy site. And that's what saved the Colosseum, because now the church is taken over. And the church now has a vested interest to make sure that the Colosseum gets spared. And what he did was he put in stations of the cross around the arena. And so that's part of being the holy site. And again, notice this is all filled in. People had forgotten. The old hypogeum was just lost to time. Nobody knew it was there. And it wasn't really discovered until the 1800s when they realized, hey, there's something down there. So who cleaned out the hypogeum? I know I've asked a lot of questions today, and quite honestly, you're not doing very well. But that's okay. It's your favorite dictator and mine, Mussolini. In the 30s, he's the one who said, we're going to clean this thing out. And so he made the effort. And he was a nationalist. He was very much into Roman history and heritage. And it makes a great photo op. But he's the one who really put the effort into saving the hypogeum. Now, the Colosseum is used one day a year. And on Good Friday, the Pope goes to the Colosseum to do the Stations of the Cross. So it does serve an official function one day a year. And I took this picture. I thought it was interesting. They are still doing work, archaeological work at the Colosseum. She was, she had the paintbrush and was slowly trying to clean off some stones. And this picture also, note how pitted. A couple reasons. When they originally built it, they put iron bands between the stones for structural support. And then they put the covering over it. So in the Dark Ages, hey, there was iron. Iron was a very valuable commodity, so they stole all the iron support brackets that were holding these stones together. And hey, it's so well built, it really didn't need them. I mean, except earthquake every now and then, but that happens. So anyway, that's why you got all these holes. And I watched a documentary about the restoration effort, and like 30 or 40 years ago, there was an effort to shore up the Colosseum, and they put in metal rods, like rebar, and those are all rusted. And so now they have to fix the fix from 40 years ago. That was part of the project. But thank God that we got someone like the gentleman who offered to pay for that. And this is such a precious piece of history. And it's brutal, it's bloody, it's a huge indicator of what the Roman culture was like. And it's one of my favorite places to visit and just be in awe of what happened in the past. Any questions? I've been asking all the questions so far.
So the Colosseum was built like in AD
80.
70? Okay.
80 AD is when it opened.
You said it took 4 years to build it?
8.
8.
8. You know, that's one thing I really had trouble wrapping my head around. Domus Aurea was built like in 2 years, 3 years. Well, you know, an architectural firm couldn't get the plans ready in 3 years, let alone build the darn thing. So I'm just in awe that these things get built so fast, because by our standard, that doesn't seem really possible. Yeah.
How far away were the stones? They had mines.
The mines, it was like 20 miles.
Wow. That's a lot of stone to take.
Yeah. Well, they had free labor from 50,000 volunteers.
It's just the mechanics of the whole thing.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And I mean, when you look at these aqueducts and, for example, the Aqua Julia, it's 36 miles, and over 36 miles, it drops 6 feet to control the flow of the water. How do you do that? You don't have the tools that we have. I mean, it's so impressive what they were able to accomplish. Thanks for coming. It's a lot of fun. And I'm sorry I talked about harming animals and killing them.